Picture the scene. It's the spring of 1780. The newly formed American states are completely bogged down in the chaos of the Revolutionary War. The British Army is lurking, villages are on edge, it's a wildly anxious time. But honestly, no war, no storm, literally nothing could have prepared this young nation for what was about to drop out of the sky. In this explainer, we're unpacking one of early America's absolute most terrifying, bizarre, and stubbornly unsolved natural mysteries, the dark day of 1780.
Just think about this for a second. What would you do if the morning sun simply never rose? I mean, imagine waking up, doing your normal morning routine, fully expecting that familiar daylight, but instead, the daylight just dies. In our world today, we'd instantly grab our phones, check the weather radar, or scroll social media to figure out what's going on. But back then, without a single one of those tools, how do you even begin to process a day where the sun is just swallowed by an absolute abyss?
Well, that terrifying hypothetical was a very real reality. May 19th, 1780. A massive chunk of New England, we're talking Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Hampshire, parts of Rhode Island, just went pitch black. And people literally thought the end of the world had arrived. No joke, people were fainting in the streets, they were weeping in churches, furiously writing goodbye letters to their loved ones. It was an event so profoundly unnatural that it silenced the entire region and left this massive, indelible mark on American history.
Now, this disaster didn't just snap into midnight instantly. It was this creeping, terrifying buildup all morning. At sunrise, things started off weird. The sky had this super eerie, copper-colored tint to it. Just this thick pink haze swallowing the horizon. It was bizarre enough that kids were actually asking their moms why the morning was so dark. Then by 8 a.m., things get way worse. The sky dims noticeably, and this heavy, oppressive stillness just drops over everything. And then noon hits, and daylight is entirely dead. People are stumbling out of their front doors, staring up at an ink-black sky, the exact kind of absolute darkness you'd only expect in the middle of a moonless night.
And it wasn't just visually dark. The air was physically choking. Witnesses at the time described the sky looking like actual burning smoke. Lots of folks insisted they could smell wood fire and sulfur in the air. Then, this dark, soot-filled rain starts coming down, so thick that people were actually collecting the weird water in jars. Up in Boston, fishermen out on the water actually lit lanterns on their boats because they were totally convinced they'd somehow slept through the whole day and woken up at night. Meanwhile, over at the Harvard College Observatory, you got these brilliant professors and students rushing outside only to realize their scientific instruments are completely useless in the gloom. So the general consensus on the streets? Judgment Day was officially here.
But you know what's absolutely fascinating here? How nature reacted. Because it wasn't just humans losing their minds. Without the sun, nature's internal biological clocks completely collapsed. Every single creature in New England totally lost its sense of time. Frogs start croaking super loudly, right, just like it's the dead of night. Chickens refuse to leave their coops and basically go to roost early. Bees head right back to their hives in the middle of the morning. Out in the woods, wolves start howling. And farmers were reporting that by noon, their oxen literally just lay down in their stalls. Even the predators were confused, and you had cattle kind of huddling defensively out in the pastures. The entire biological rhythm of the whole region was just shattered.
Now, it's absolutely crucial to point out that this wasn't just some localized panic among superstitious villagers. This event deeply rattled the most rational, scientific minds of the era. Take George Washington. He's down in New Jersey traveling with his officers, trying to manage the Revolutionary War. He writes in his weather journal about this unusual and extraordinary darkness, eventually calling it an impenetrable gloom. I mean, imagine trying to lead an army during a war. You're already stressed about British patrols, and suddenly you have to order your soldiers to light torches in their camps at midday, just so they can see each other. Washington had seen eclipses before, but he knew right away this was something totally different.
But hey, not everyone let the fear completely take over. Up in Connecticut, you had terrified state legislators actively debating whether to just permanently adjourn the General Assembly because they honestly feared the apocalypse was happening. But then, this lawmaker named Abraham Davenport stands up, and he delivers this absolutely legendary line. He says, "If it is the day of judgment, I choose to be found doing my duty, bring in the candles." Talk about a mic drop, right? He completely refused to give in to the panic. He just asked for some light and kept right on working in the pitch black. It's a phenomenal display of composure when everything around you screams the end of days.
So this heavy darkness dragged on for hours. But when evening finally rolls around and the blackness slowly starts to lift, the weirdness wasn't over. Not even close. The night that followed featured a moon rising blood red. Observers described it as looking exactly like molten copper. The stars were super faint, heavily distorted, and there were these weird shimmering lights down at the horizon. Now today, we know this was just smoke particles refracting the light, turning the moon that deep crimson color. But put yourself in 1780. You just survived a day without a sun, and now there's a bleeding moon in the night sky? That must have felt like absolute confirmation of the supernatural. 200! For almost 2 entire centuries, the real cause behind this terrifying dark day stayed a complete mystery. Just think about that for a second. 200 years of scientists, historians, and meteorologists endlessly arguing about what on earth could have possibly swallowed the sun over New England that day. For decades, science essentially had to play a massive game of elimination. Obviously, you had the 1780s beliefs, everyone assuming it was the literal apocalypse or some purely supernatural curse. But as science advanced, researchers started looking for hard evidence. Was it a solar eclipse? Nope, impossible. Astronomical records prove 0 eclipses happened that day. Okay, what about a massive volcanic eruption? Again, no. Geological records showed absolutely no known eruption at that time. Even massive thunderstorms didn't line up with the historical weather reports. For the longest time, science was just pulling a blank.
And then, finally, in the 1980s, we got the breakthrough. Researchers found the answer, but they didn't find it looking up at the sky. They found it by looking into trees. By going through old Canadian records and specifically analyzing tree rings all the way up in the Algonquin Highlands of Ontario, they uncovered these massive, undeniable fire scars. And the kicker? Those scars dated precisely to the spring of 1780. The 200-year mystery was finally unlocked. The culprit wasn't supernatural at all. It was an absolutely massive Canadian wildfire.
So let's break down exactly how this happened, because the mechanics here are just fascinating. Step 1. One of the largest wildfires in North American history sparks up in Ontario. This fire burns so incredibly hot that it launches ash and thick smoke miles up into the sky. Step 2. That colossal column of smoke mixes in with some really dense fog that was already hanging out in the atmosphere. Step 3. High-altitude winds catch this toxic, blackened sludge cloud and carry it hundreds of miles straight south, right over New England. And finally, Step 4. This thick layer acts exactly like a giant blackout curtain. It blocks the sun's rays and completely filters out specific light wavelengths. That is exactly what created those bizarre pink, yellow, and eventually ink-black skies that completely terrified the colonists.
Today, historians and meteorologists point to the dark day of 1780 as the earliest large-scale meteorological phenomenon ever recorded in early American history. But honestly, beyond the really cool science, what this story truly captures is human curiosity, courage, and just raw resilience. In a time when science was still pretty primitive and a brutal war was already pushing them to their limits, the people of 1780 held their ground. They lit their candles. They kept doing their jobs, like our guy Abraham Davenport. They recorded careful scientific observations, just like George Washington did, and they survived a day when nature flexed a completely incomprehensible level of power.
I want to leave you with a thought here. If a freak natural event completely blacked out the sun today, like if some atmospheric anomaly suddenly plunged our modern, hyper-connected world into absolute pitch darkness right at midday, how would we really react? Do you think our technology would save us from panicking, or would we feel the exact same primal, terrifying dread that gripped New England over 2 centuries ago? It's a humbling reminder that no matter how incredibly advanced we get, we are still very much at the mercy of the natural world. Thanks for joining.